Hello, folks. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Federalist Files. On today's show, Big Tech suspending dissenters, Israel buys $700 million worth of weaponry from the United States, government employees admit communist movement inside the government, Joe Rogan warns of cancel culture, and I finally break down the myth of trickle-down economics.
Flare-ups can occur, but if the unvaccinated get vaccinated, they will protect themselves and other unvaccinated people around them. If they do not, states with low vaccination rates may see those rates go up, may see this progress reversed. Ultimately, those who are not vaccinated will end up paying the price. The vaccinated will continue to be protected against severe illnesses.
Hello, folks. I greatly appreciate you, as always, for tuning in to the show. We're going to get right to it today. That's Joe Biden. He's talking about how we're going to pay the ultimate. We're going to pay the price if we don't get vaccinated. Now, I don't know exactly if that's a threat. They're talking about, there's a lot of talks right now about some sort of segregation of vaccinated / non-vaccinated people. You know, everyone's coming out saying, well, the vaccinated people should be able to do whatever they want. They should be able to do this. They should be able, and then the unvaccinated people, you guys are going to have to still walk around with your masks. I don't see this being done. I also don't see the installation of a COVID-19 card, a vaccination ID card. The only time I could see that is if you're flying. Personally, I don't think it's going to happen. But when you're flying, maybe it may be instilled. I don't know at this point. So Biden, he calls for a ceasefire in Israel this past weekend. He came out, he said that this is a Daily Caller piece, I got it directly from, and this is a quote straight from the White House. It states, and I quote, "The president reiterated his firm support for Israel's right to defend itself against indiscriminate rocket attacks. The president welcomed efforts to address intercommunal violence and to bring calm to Jerusalem. He encouraged Israel to make every effort to ensure the protection of innocent civilians. The two leaders discussed progress in Israel's military operations against Hamas and other terrorist groups in Gaza. The president expressed his support for a ceasefire and discussed U.S. engagement with Egypt and other partners towards that end. The two leaders agreed that they and their teams would remain in close touch." So it seems like from what I'm seeing in the news is that Netanyahu has the go-ahead, and they have been really taking Hamas out from their they've been going at their knees pretty much. They've been trying to take out every single big-time leader of Hamas at some of these missile sites. They've been going after them probably harder than I've ever seen before over these past couple of years. For instance, I stated this in the last episode. This actually just happened in the last episode at the time while I was recording. So I have some more information on it now. The bombed Associated Press office, that building specifically, the Associated Press comes out. They say, oh, well, we never thought anybody was in that building. We didn't think there was any type of Hamas leadership or any Hamas operations or offices there. Now we're able to confirm via the Washington Free Beacon. I have an article from Andrew Stiles here. We're able to confirm that, yes, there were many operations and offices in that building specifically. And then I was also reading how there's certain rules. We can only go to a certain floor, and then people were watching each individual floor. So you have to remember, the Associated Press, and that's going to be a theme of this show, the media is not here to help you. They are anti-America at this point. That's what they are. They are they love the death to America crowd, the Hamases of the world, the Irans, they love them. They're on their side more than they are on the side of you, the people in America. And you also have to remember, this is the AP building that is in the West Bank. So what do you expect the AP employees there to tell you? We know that they're already a leftist rag. So at this point, now that they're in West Gaza, they're in the West Bank, Gaza Strip, it doesn't matter. So Straight from the piece, an office building destroyed by Israeli airstrikes on Saturday was reportedly used by the Associated Press and the Islamic terrorist group Hamas, according to the national security expert Noah Pollack. The building contained several Hamas facilities, including weapons manufacturing and military intelligence units, and the AP journalists were aware. They were aware of the terrorist activities. He goes on, Pollack, and this is what he wrote on Twitter, spoke to a well-placed friend in the IDF, which is the Israeli Defense Forces, just now. The bombed AP building, office building, contained multiple Hamas operations and offices, including weapons manufacturing and military intelligence. The building also housed an Islamic Jihad office, and AP's local reporters knew about it, end quote. So they knew this entire time. They knew about it. Which is, I mean, it's obvious. Like I said, the American media, because the Associated Press is derived from America, the American media is not here to help you, along with the social media companies, as well as big tech organizations. They are anti-America. They're antithetical to our existence as a country, and especially as a conservative party. Okay, so the AP, which had used the building as an office for 15 years, they've been there. They've been criticized for their cozying up relationship with Hamas. Now, the Atlantic's Maddie Friedman reported this in 2014. Remember, folks, we are in 2021. This is 7 years ago. We had Maddie Friedman from the Atlantic reported this in 2014. The AP staff in Gaza City would witness a rocket launch right beside their office, endangering reporters and other civilians nearby, and the AP wouldn't report it. Not even in AP articles about Israeli claims that Hamas was launching rockets from residential areas. And this has happened. Hamas fighters would burst into the AP's Gaza bureau and threaten the staff, and the AP wouldn't report it. This also happened. Cameramen waiting outside Shifa Hospital in Gaza City would film the arrival of civilian casualties, and then at a signal from an official, turn off their cameras. When wounded and dead fighters came in, helping Hamas maintain the illusion that only civilians were dying. This too often happened. The information comes from multiple sources with first-hand knowledge of these incidents. So these people that were dealing with these terrorist organizations, they understand American optics. They also understand Israeli optics. But for the most part, they really do understand, and they have a very good comprehension of American politics and American optics. So what they do, they hide all the deaths, and you've noticed this is there's been no official death count of Hamas soldiers that have died or Hamas terrorists that have died. We're being told that people at the top of the organization have been targeted by the Israeli Defense Forces, and those are the ones that are being primarily taken out. In the crossfire of this, there has been civilian casualties. But those are the only things that are being reported. Nothing else gets reported. If you notice, and then you'll notice the media will only report the deaths of civilians on each side, and then they'll compare it. Israel didn't have as many deaths on their side because they have these bomb shelters that are actually sanctioned through their codified law there in the country of Israel, because they're so used to these missile strikes. That's to protect their civilians. So what we have the left-wing media, the corporate media hacks, that are antithetical to our America as we know it, or America as we knew it before this administration. They are reporting on behalf of Hamas. They will not report any casualties of their officers. They only go forward and they only report civilian casualties to try to create this narrative that Israel is the aggressor and they are the ones killing civilians, when that's just not the case. And I also have some more. I have more evidence of this today. I have a lot. I have this one article, and I'm just going to leave it in the show notes. I actually highly suggest that you read it. It's kind of like a little op-ed piece. It is titled "The Media Hates You and is Surprised You Hate It Back." Town hall piece. It's written by Kurt Schlichter. It's very interesting. It goes into the intricacies of how the media views you, and how they're so often to attack you and make you out as the American to be the bad guy, as the successful person to be the terrible person. And then when the AP building got smashed over or got missile striked over in the West Bank, you saw Americans, regular working class Americans, almost come out cheering for it, because the media in this country has been known now over these last couple of years. Probably, I'd say, since, I mean, it's been a long time. Even Bush, they were very, very, very partial in their approach. I don't know. It's been such a long time since the media has been considered somewhat impartial or kind of middle groundy. Now they're just super far leftists. I'd probably say 90% of the media are pretty far left. And far left, I don't mean Democrat left. I mean like literal leftist, socialist left. And they're surprised that everyone was happy when their building got crashed out. And they continue to attack you, and then they expect you to have they expect to have no repercussions and be immune to any criticism. So what I have is this Israeli scholar, this legal scholar. He was removed from YouTube after defending Israeli airstrikes. The Washington Free Beacon piece. It's written by Santi Ruiz. His name is Eugene Kontorovich. He is a professor at George Mason University. He appeared on YouTube to explain why Israel's counterstrikes in Gaza are protected by international law. Okay, so YouTube removed the video of his appearance because apparently it violated some sort of company terms of service, and then it later reversed the decision and restored the video without an explanation of why, which often happens to a lot of people. I think Steve Crowder actually right now, I think he just came out today saying he's going to sue Twitter, or he's going to sue YouTube because they gave him his second code violation and with no reasoning towards it. So I think he's going to push a lawsuit against him as well. And this often happens to conservatives. So his video was taken down 24 hours, and then apparently they put it back up. So the move continues a pattern of capricious moderation of content related to Israel from social media platforms in April. The Chinese-owned platform TikTok hosted a series of viral videos of Arabs assaulting Orthodox Jews. Although it was unclear at press time what rule YouTube cited in removing the video, the company says it removes content promoting violence or hatred against a number of groups, including victims of a major violent event and their kin. So we also have TikTok doing the same thing, Chinese-owned platform. What they're doing is they're throttling content, and they're showing viral videos of Arabs assaulting Orthodox Jews. It's just there's a moderation coming from these social media, and it's all politically motivated from these social media sites. I've had people reach out to me over the last couple of days and say, "Oh, Israel's the aggressor," and everything is so conflated and convoluted right now. And I said, "What are you guys talking? I have all the information. I've been sitting here reading all the articles. I know somewhat. I have a decent understanding of the history behind these two groups, or behind these two countries, I guess you would call them, and these terrorist groups that attack Israel consistently. I mean, over the last couple of years, and the narrative that's being painted right now, it's mainstream. It's everywhere. They keep it on Facebook. They throttle any content that dissents to that objects to what their narrative, what they want their narrative to be. They have such a strong control on the elements of information that you receive on those sites. If you're somebody that is not well informed, you are not reading much, you just believe whatever the narrative is that Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube wants you to believe, because that's the only thing you see on a consistent basis. It's the only thing that is being pushed and promoted on those sites. So Iranians recently came out in the United States, might I add. Foreign Desk News piece. They came out in support of Israel. They're signing this huge petition, and they're American Iranians, obviously. They're American immigrants. They immigrated from Iran. And I've actually heard this around. Iraqis and Iranians that are American citizens that is their home country. Apparently they love Donald Trump. From what I understand, they love Donald Trump. They're usually on the right. They're really not left-wing at all. And they support the Republican Party, which I think is just very interesting. So the U.S., they approved this $735 million weapon sale to Israel. Now, you would think, okay, so, wow, this looks really strong. This looks like Joe Biden is supporting Israel right now in their endeavor to pretty much eradicate Hamas. And that's just not the case, actually. So it looks good on paper. This deal has been waiting since I think it was March, from what I read. Oh, I'm sorry. This potential sale was May 5th, and this was a couple days before the actual missile strikes on Israel. So if they were in a predicament here, the administration could say, oh, well, we're not going to sell you what you need, but then that would make them look terrible to Israel. Or we can go ahead with what we said before, and we're going to go through with the deal. So the deal is kind of, if this deal is already pre-negotiated, if they wanted this right now, I actually, and this is sad, this is pathetic that we've gotten to this point as a country. I think that the current administration, if they suddenly came out with this deal right now, hey, we need this much, I really do think the current administration would not give it to them for political reasons. Or they would give them a lot less than what they actually need to protect their people there. So Congress, it says, according to this report, Congress was notified of this potential sale on May 5th. 3 people that are familiar with the matter told the Washington Post, and they reported this. The sale was proposed almost a week before Hamas began firing rockets into Israel, reportedly killing at least 10 Israelis so far. A House Foreign Affairs Committee spokesperson confirmed that Congress was informed about the sale on May 5th, noting that Boeing will provide the weapons to the Middle Eastern nation. So Boeing, I guess, is the company making all of it. So on Saturday, and this is really where Netanyahu is saying what they're doing, what their operations are right now, and they are going for the throat right now on Hamas. From what it seems like, they're not holding anything back. And I think the reason that they're going forward with this and they're so aggressive right now is because they do not have confidence in the next 4 years. They don't have confidence in the administration currently that is in America, so they think they need to go for broke. They need to destroy and eradicate the best way that they can Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, whoever it is, Islamic Jihad in their area, in the region, for them, needs to be decimated. And that's the reason I think they're going through with this right now, and they are so aggressive comparatively to before, where, you know, they'd have a couple strikes back, and then usually they kind of lay off for a couple of years or a couple of months. Really, they were much more reactive than proactive. Now that they have been attacked, they are going for broke. They're going full-fledged in on this one, because I think they have no confidence in this administration protecting them in the United States, so they need to flex their muscle in the region. They need to let everybody in the Middle Eastern region know that they're playing for keeps. They're not messing around. You guys are not going to take our country from us. So on Saturday, Prime Minister Netanyahu, he said Israel is prepared to continue the operation to, and I quote, destroy the Hamas tunnel network for as long as necessary. So as long as necessary until it is destroyed, essentially, is what he's saying. So he goes on. The party that bears the guilt for this confrontation is not us. It's those attacking us. Reported from Reuters. He continues, we are still in the midst of this operation. It is still not over, and this operation will continue as long as necessary. So he is very, very bullish right now in taking out Hamas. So he goes on. He states, unlike Hamas, which deliberately intends to harm civilians while hiding behind civilians, we are doing everything to avoid or limit as much as possible harming civilians and to directly strike terrorists instead. End quote. So he's right. These are truthful statements from him. Historically, this is how Hamas handles things. Hamas attacks from civilian populations, from civilian buildings like schools, religious institutions like mosques, and they use them as a human shield. And they know the optics. Once again, they know how the American media, because the American media is on their side, how they're going to play this one out. They're going to make it like Israel's the aggressor, and how inhumane they would be to attack a school or attack a mosque. So they don't do that. Israel does not do that. But those rules of engagement, they work, not in their favor, obviously, because they cannot eradicate the threat. So the Israel Defense Forces tweeted that the target is the, and I quote, Hamas Metro tunnel system in Gaza, end quote, with the operation utilizing 160 aircraft, tanks, and artillery and infantry units. So they are not messing around. It's going to heat up in this region. Hopefully, I don't know what's going to happen, if there's going to be any type of ceasefire anytime soon. I do not think so, because the administration is weak and they are soft. So Israel right now thinks that they need to take things into their own hands and they have to rectify the issue in the region. And I think there's actually some broad support in the Middle East because of those recent peace deals, hopefully, because people really are actually afraid of Iran, as I said before. So, Space Force officer fired after denouncing Marxism and critical race theory in the military. This is a Washington Examiner piece. It's written by Carly Ortiz Lytle. So this guy, I'm trying to find his name, figure out his name. He's a Space Force officer. He wrote a book denouncing, Marxism, and he went on a podcast to talk about it a little bit. He was the commander. I got all these advertisements here. Lieutenant General Stephen Whiting, Space Operations Commander. The name of the actual guy, he fired this dude. The Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lomier. He's the one that ended up losing his job because he came out with this book, and I don't remember exactly. The name of the book is Irresistible Revolution, Marxism's Goal of Conquest and the Unmaking of the American Military. If you guys want to go buy it, I think right now it's number 1 on the charts. It's hitting big time. Once again, I'm going to state the name of it. Irresistible Revolution, Marxism's Goal of Conquest and the Unmaking of the American Military. And if you've seen these last couple of days, we've come out with, we have these weird intersectional videos that are coming out on the CIA's website. I think the FBI even had one. Then we also as well had one in a couple of these military branches. And they talk about intersectionality. They talk about diversity. They talk about things that really have nothing to do with battlefield expertise and being effective on the battlefield, or being effective in your job in the CIA or the FBI and looking for intelligence, searching for the bad guy. They're giving you all these character traits. I don't even want to call them character traits. These traits that in the left-wing organizations or in the left wing are extolled, really, because that's all they care about. That's the highest virtue for them. It's not actually about doing your job and being efficient and protecting the American people. At this point now, the highest virtue is intersectionality. It's race politics. So this guy came out against Marxism, and this is what he stated. He stated, and I quote, "My intent never has been to engage in partisan politics. I've written a book about a particular political ideology, which is Marxism, in the hope that our Defense Department might return to being politically nonpartisan in the future as it has honorably done throughout history." This is what he told military.com. So next he goes on to state, "What you see happening in the U.S. military at the moment is that if you're a conservative, then you're lumped into a group of people who are labeled extremists. If you're willing to voice your views, and if you're aligned with the left, then it's okay to be an activist online because no one's going to hold you accountable." End quote. So there's certain things that you're restricted from, considering you are, I think it's called Hatch Act violation. You're an executive branch employee. Technically, you're in the Department of Defense. You can only say certain things when you're off the job. You're not wearing the uniform. You can go on social media, I'm pretty sure, and say whatever you want. But if you're in uniform and you go to say something, you can get fired for that. You can lose your job, or you get some sort of demerit on your record. In this case, they just straight up fired this guy. We do have Marxism penetrating the government in a general sense. We also do have this intersectionality, and what it is we have this Marxism that is infiltrating this country through virtue signaling in this race politic, gender politic, sex politic, sexuality politic ideology. We have it penetrating as a Trojan horse right now for communism, for Marxism. That's what's going on right now. So I have this Project Veritas video, and this is actually a throwback video where they exposed a couple of government employees. Some of them I think were in the DOJ, some of them were in the Department of Defense. Much more administrative from what I understand. Actually, I think there was one in there from I want to say the CIA as well, like an intelligence gatherer. And they go on, they talk about how there is a left-wing push right now in the government, and they are getting together, and it's much more rampant than you would think it is. It's a large group, and they say that we're going to overthrow the system from within. So check that out. Play 5.
Released undercover investigations into various officials, Stuart Carafa said, quote, resist everything, every level, F shit up.
Everything.
Everything.
Every level.
So when we sent someone a secondary address, their license plate was outside, and it had a bumper sticker for a school their kid went to.
Okay. Also, we're able to run license plates through
We cannot do it officially.
I have a couple socialist workers where like they joined the SA.
Yeah.
Really? It's great. And then there's a lot of talk at work about like how we can resist from inside. Yeah. And there's like a lot of kind of like pushback.
If you're an executive branch agency, you can slow ball things to a degree that it's like ineffective, and maybe you get in trouble, and maybe you get fired or you resign or whatever, but like you slow them down for a certain period of time.
Is the resistance just your friend, or is it like a bunch of people?
It's like a bunch of people.
That's a very chilling clip there. So you have DOJ employees admitting that they can't check license plates officially, but they're going to do it anyway. So they're infringing on the individual rights, the Fourth Amendment of the people. They're admittedly doing it as well. And then you have socialists. They're saying, we're in here to F shit up, what the one guy says. We're here to burn down the system. Essentially, we have these communist activists in our government, and this is the DOJ, the Department of Justice, and this is what they did to the Trump administration when they went through with this big old Mueller report. You heard the one guy saying, if you want, you can really slow things down. Yeah, maybe you'll get fired or you'll resign eventually, but you can really affect the organization by doing that. And that's really what the point is of these socialist these activists. And at the very end of the video, when they ask, is it just your one friend? How many are there? And, no, it's a big group of them. So we have this, and this is exactly what President Obama did. Obama, when he was in college, was a commie. He was part of many communist organizations. He would go and speak at events as a commie. And he said he was much smarter than the regular communist. Regular communist says we need to physically burn it to the ground, and that's how we're going to fix this system, just like Hawk Newsom said, the BLM. He's like a BLM head over in New York, in that wing over there. He said the same thing, we're going to burn it to the ground if we don't get what we want. Now, Obama was smarter than that. Obama said, what we'll do is we're going to work our way up through the system. We're going to use the right avenues that you need to do to get into the government. And that is what these kids are doing. These kids are signing up to work for the FBI or work for the DOJ. And slowly but surely, they are transforming the organization. We have changed the fundamentals of schooling, our society, everything. Politics is the downstream of culture, our culture as well. Everything has changed. And like I said, they have so much power if you think about what the communist mindset is, the Marxist mindset is. You are never accountable for yourself. Everything that is done wrong to you or you are unsuccessful in is the blame of somebody else. And the government will take care of you. You will not have to earn a living. You will not have to work hard for your wages. You can just sit at home, or you can work any job and you all make the same. So it's very appealing. You have to understand, when you grow up in your own home, your parents are giving you things. I mean, it is almost like it's like a communist system. You don't have to work for anything, and you're just getting it handed to you. Now that's not sustainable at all. It never has been historically. And that is what they're pushing for in this country. That's what they want. You hear the common argument of socialism's never been done correctly. That's always the comment. It's been done something like 50 different times in the history of, or what was it? What was that one guy was saying? It was either 50 or 500. It was a lot of time. It's never successfully been done. And the answer is always, this time we're going to get it done successfully. When you give that much power to the government, you install this weird police state, spy state type system where they take over everything, all facets of life, all facets of your personal life, as well as your public and your private life now get convoluted, and they seem like they're the same thing. And then they take out over all the businesses, they fail all the businesses, and then the money runs out. They have no one left to tax because they failed all the businesses, but they took over everybody else's businesses. And that's usually how it works. It's a very slippery slope, and that's why Venezuela right now has inflation rates that are something like 20,000%. And these are the people that are trying to infiltrate our system. They've done it through the public schooling of our children. Now they're actually doing it in the corporate world. That's why you see all these corporations coming out with this intersectionality, this critical race theory ideology that's being taught in orientations of all these new employees. People are being brainwashed from almost, from the age of 5 up until they get out of college. And then they go to these organizations, and then they are now fundamentally changing the culture of these organizations. They're turning Wall Street, or they're turning corporations into these leftist hubs for socialist groupthink and communism, which, and it is actually, it shows how ineffective those policies are. It shows how ineffective leftism is, that they have the power over big tech. They have the power to censor anybody. They have the power to manipulate the results of searches, so everything that you look up comes back as a leftist or a socialist search result. Everything. They really do. They have the power to influence the thoughts of everyone in this country. Anyone that's using any type of technology, any type of social media site especially, that's where they hold most of their power and most of their influence, and they have the power to influence the culture, and they have done that over time. And now we're kind of getting whim of it, when we had 4 years, and the Republican Party had 4 years to change it, when they did nothing on it. That's really what the problem is. So Prince Harry, that's what I have. I have this story about Prince Harry calling America's First Amendment quote-unquote bonkers. This is a Daily Caller piece written by Christopher Tremogli. So we had Prince Harry. He went on that podcast, The Armchair Expert, with Dax Shepard. Dax Shepard's kind of like a pretty famous actor. He went on there, and he's talking about his nonprofit role that he has at the Aspen Institute, and he will serve as the Commission on Information Disorder. I don't know exactly what that is. I guess they look through information, whether it's disinformation, misinformation, what have you. He's going to conduct a study with 14 other people on a panel to analyze the spread of incorrect information throughout the country, according to The Spectator. So pretty much what it sounds like to me, and this is pathetic. Honestly, this is so pathetic that you went from being the prince over in the United Kingdom, in Great Britain, you were the prince, and now you're working for some nonprofit, looking through information, leftist information, and take with a leftist lean, saying it's correct or not, or giving it 4 Pinocchios like Washington Post does. This is pathetic. This is his job now. This is what he does for a living. So he goes on to state, and this is him talking about the First Amendment. As I've said, the experience of today's digital world has us inundated with an avalanche of misinformation, affecting our ability as individuals as well as societies to think clearly and truly understand the world we live in. It's my belief that this is a humanitarian issue, and as such it demands a multi-stakeholder response from advocacy voices, members of the media, academic researchers, and both government and civil society leaders. End quote. So what are you thinking? How elitist and how smug and how arrogant do you have to be? You come from Great Britain. Because you're now in our world, bro. You were in America, okay? You come here, and then you start attacking, the misinformation. We have to watch out for that. We need to regulate it. We need the government involved. We need all of society involved. It's a humanitarian, and this is what they do. They hide behind the guise humanitarian. It's a global health issue, or they'll say the other one is it's an issue of racism. They'll use all of these Trojan horses to push whatever their narrative is, and in this case, the narrative is, misinformation, as in conservative information that disagrees with what you guys think the narrative is. So it's not incorrect information. It's just information that dissents from your information. You guys fact check opinions. There's no fact-based information when it comes to opinion. You want to make an opinion, you make an opinion, and that's it. You can't mark it up as misinformation just because you disagree with it. I mean, we're not talking about statistics here. So next he goes on, and this is where he gets the First Amendment thing. He states, and I quote, "I've got so much I want to say about the First Amendment, as I sort of understand it, but it is bonkers," which is a ridiculous word to use, but I guess, Great Britain, they suck, so whatever. So he goes on, "I don't want to start going down the First Amendment route because that's a huge subject and one which I don't understand because I've only been here a short time. But you can find a loophole in anything. You can capitalize or exploit what's not said rather than uphold what is said." End quote. So you have a guy gets onto a nonprofit reading for misinformation, doesn't even know what the First Amendment is, and then criticizes the First Amendment. Yeah, this sounds like a recipe for disaster to me. He's saying what is and what isn't misinformation, and he knows nothing about the First Amendment to begin with. So does the First Amendment protect misinformation? Yes, it does. In the case of these social media companies just take it off the web, or they put a disclaimer on it. In terms of me sitting here and saying things, as long as I'm not defaming somebody's character, or, the idea of calling for direct acts of violence, pretty much everything is legal. I mean, even defaming somebody's character to an extent is legal. You're not going to get thrown in prison for it. You may get a civil lawsuit out of it. It's pretty hard to prove in court as well. And this idea of regulating people's speech is the problem. And in Great Britain, I know there's certain regulation laws, but in a general sense, they have kind of a freedom of speech-ish, a little bit. I mean, they have some problems. There is a higher standard that their press over there is actually held to than our press in America is. They have to actually be factually correct, and if they're not, then I'm pretty sure they're definitely liable for big-time civil lawsuits. So they're more accurate in their information that they report. But I think this is much more up to the people, the individual citizen, to read up on your own. If you were, I agree with that much more, because if you have the government regulating speech, they're pretty much regulating what is right and what is wrong at that point. So they can regulate, oh, well, this is factual information, this is correct. Or they could say, even if it is correct, they could say, well, this is incorrect, you got to take it off, it needs to be taken down, you're going to open yourself up for civil lawsuits, or we're going to throw you in prison for it. I think that's really where the problem lies, and in Great Britain, all those rules are pretty much enforced by the government over there. So I think that you just need a well-read population, astute population that is able to read into the issues and as well as analyze information. I mean, it's not that difficult to figure out. This is like basic human ability to read into people. I mean, it's not, it really, truly, it is not that difficult. I've talked to people about this, and they say there should be some sort of, and here's the thing. Why can't you read it independently, think for yourself, instead of have to go to a specific certain place to learn what you think is factual information? There is factual information, and then there's things that are out of context that will show, hey, this many Palestinians died, and they won't tell you what the death count is on the Israel side. Well, yeah, well, that's correct. If there were that many Palestinian people that died, but they failed to show us the other side because that's the context that they put it in. That's the narrative that they're trying to paint. And just read a little bit. In America, we used to be, and they talk about it in the Federalist Papers, the people of America were the most well-informed people of their liberties and their rights and their freedoms. And now it seems like that has fallen on the wayside because we have gotten very, very cushy, and we've become comfortable with the lifestyle of being able to turn on Netflix or go on our laptop and watch a movie. So Joe Rogan, a little bit, he has something to say that he reported in his on his podcast. I don't exactly know who his guest was. He talked about it very briefly on his show, the woke culture and how it will end in dismay and chaos. Play 7.
You can never be woke enough. That's the problem. It keeps going. It keeps going further and further and further down the line. And if you get to the point where you capitulate, where you agree to all these demands, it will eventually get to straight white men are not allowed to talk.
Right.
Because it's your privilege to express yourself when other people of color have been silenced throughout history. It will be, you're not allowed to go outside because so many people were imprisoned for so many years. I mean, I'm not joking.
No, I know.
It really will get there. It's that crazy. You know, we just got to be nice to each other, man. And there's a lot of people that are taking advantage of this weirdness in our culture, and then that becomes their thing. Their thing is calling people out for their privilege, calling people out for their position.
You know, Joe Rogan has a lot of influence. I think he has something like 6 million listeners. He's a huge audience, and it was very... See, this is the problem. This is where Fox News, this is where, you know, the conservatives or whatever you would call them on Fox News, I would call them more like Republicans on that Greg Gutfeld show. They were talking about how Joe Rogan said, if you're a young guy, you're in shape, I don't think you should go get a vaccination. And they were ripping him. They were really condemning him on that show. And they're making fun of him. But here's the thing. Joe Rogan has a huge influence. He has a huge audience. He's very well read. I mean, the guy's a liberal. He's not a conservative. I don't agree with him on everything. But this is why Republicans lose. Because they're so unrelatable. They can't relate to people on that side. And he's a liberal. He's not a far leftist. he would be very easy to bring his audience onto the right side, because most of them are on the right side. They work out, they do MMA, they believe in the Second Amendment, they believe in the First Amendment. He has a pretty, right-wing audience in a general sense, mostly probably libertarians if I had to take a guess at it. And they attack him. They condemn him. And really, I don't know if it's exactly that because Greg Gutfeld's a comedian, or if it's just that they're truly jealous of him because he's extremely successful. I mean, the guy just signed a $100 million deal with Spotify, and he goes on there and he says whatever the F he wants. He doesn't have to care about political correctness. You guys, you idiots, you show up on Fox News and you go on your late night with Greg Gutfeld show, and then you condemn it and you scorn the guy that is actually on a platform speaking freely, which you have to respect at the end of the day, because what he says isn't always the acceptable opinion to hold, whereas you guys kind of dance around everything and you won't actually say what you want because you're on Fox News, and Fox News really is not a right-wing bastion of conservatism. It's much more middle-right, it's middle-right wing. It was pretty sad, and that's why the Republican Party is so deeply unrelatable, because they cannot reach out to any other audience and they just attack. And it wasn't even. I mean, I know it's a comedy show and they're supposed to make jokes, but nothing that they were said was even funny. They were just pretty much called Joe Rogan an idiot. It's like, this dude he's built this podcast empire, and you guys are so old school and so old fashioned thinking that you don't see into the future. You guys are just not prepared for anything. You're not preemptive in your approach to anything. This is why you are getting beat by guys like Joe Rogan. This is why the corporate media, and Fox News included, this is why you're getting beat by podcasters around the world. This is why Louder Crowder has more viewership or more subscribers than you do on your stupid Greg Gutfeld show. Because he's relatable, he puts out very good content. He doesn't have to worry about it. I got to worry about my bosses telling me. There's no regulation of his content. Whatever he wants to put out is what he puts out. And, if YouTube takes him down, so be it. He's on Rumble now. And he does his show how it is. When he pitched his Change My Mind segment, anybody that's ever seen the meme, when there's a statement, the guy's sitting there at the table, Change My Mind. Steven Crowder, he originally pitched that about 10 years ago to Fox News, and they told him that will never work. Because right now, what is happening in our country, we have people that are so hungry and so desperate for any type of substantive argument and any type of substantive information that they're willing to go listen to Ben Shapiro. They're willing to go listen to Joe Rogan, Louder Crowder. They want to listen to those people because they have these long-form, discussions or arguments, what have you, comparatively where you turn on Fox News or CNN and it is just confirmation bias down your throat is the first thing. And the second thing is any debate there is, it's not long. It's not like a long-term deal. It's you get a 30-second clip to bring your point out, which just isn't enough time. It's the same thing with the debate when they have debates between the Republicans or the Democrats. It's always, you get 2 minutes. Actually, 2 minutes is a little longer than they give on Fox News for their segments. And they're just so, like I said, they're so deeply unrelatable. And they're trying so hard to hold on to the power that they have in that sector. And it seems like they're soon, hopefully they're obsolete soon, because we no longer need them because they do not give us good content. So next what I have this, and I'm going to get to the economics section here. Trickle-down economics and how it is a left-wing fabricated theory. I've always wanted to go over this, but I haven't really had the time. So in this segment, I'm going to go over trickle-down economics and how it's just made up by the left pretty much. It's like a red herring argument. They made up some sort of argument for them to sit there and debate you on, and they assign it to you as if that's your argument, and now you have to defend something that you're like, I've never even heard of trickle-down economics before. It's written by Stephen Horowitz. So first, he starts off. It's a long piece. I'm going to try to summarize it the best way that I can. He goes through a little Thomas Sowell, and at the very end of this, I'm going to show a short clip of Thomas Sowell. So he starts off, people who argue for tax cuts, less government spending, and more freedom for people to produce and trade what they think is valuable are often accused of supporting something called trickle-down economics. It's hard to pin down exactly what that term means, but it seems to be something like the following. And this is the way that the left, envisions trickle-down economics. They state, Those free market folks believe that if you give tax cuts or subsidies to rich people, the wealth they acquire will somehow trickle down to the poor. So that's generally how the left phrases it. Now, the problem with this term is that, as far as I know, no economist has ever used this term or to describe their own views. Critics of the market should take up the challenge of finding a solid economist with some sort of prominence who argues something like, if you give this group on the very top, these top layer, these top tier people that make the most money, if we give them things, are they going to pass it down to things that are below people below them? And that's just not the case. There's no economist that has ever actually no prominent economist that has ever stated this theory and defended it. So he goes on to say, I submit they will fail in finding one because such a person does not exist. Plus, as Thomas Sowell has pointed out, the whole argument is silly. And this is what Thomas Sowell would say. Why not just give whatever the things are to Group B directly and eliminate the middleman? See, this is the way that the left thinks. This is the way that commies think. They think we need to redistribute their wealth. We need to take the people from the top, take their money, and give it to you on the bottom. So when a conservative comes over and they say, I don't believe in that system, so they go, well, what is it that you believe in? You believe the government taking the money from the poor and giving it to the rich? That is the way that they envision your argument, because all they believe in is total, complete, raw political power. That is all they know. So they think that their opposing side has some other idea of raw political power that they currently do not hold. So it goes on. There's no economic argument that claims the policies that themselves only benefit the wealthy directly will somehow trickle down to the poor, transferring wealth to the poor or to the rich, or even tax cuts that only apply to them are not policies that are going to benefit the poor, or certainly not in any notable way. Now, defenders of markets are certainly not going to support direct transfers or subsidies to the rich in any case. That's precisely the sort of crony capitalism that true liberals reject. So yeah, crony capitalism, the idea of giving certain people tax cuts, not giving them to other people, or transferring wealth. You know what crony capitalism is? I'll tell you. When they decided to bail out the banks, when Obama decided to bail out the banks, that is crony capitalism. He should have let the banks fail. They would have been bought up by other companies, more successful companies, and they would have ran the banks. Same thing with Ford and GM. I don't know who bailed them out specifically. I think it was also the Obama. It was either Obama or it was Bush. It may have been Bush. I may be wrong on that. Also, let me check real quick, because I think who bailed out Ford. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 2009. So it was Obama administration that bailed out Ford, and then bailed out the big banks as well. That's what I figured. So their idea is, and this is the way it's always phrased by the left, is, well, the Trump tax cut benefited the rich. I'm like, yeah, it benefited the rich. They got a 2% tax. So let's be clear. The federal government gave a 2% tax cut to the rich. They still are paying more than middle class. Middle class got a 28%. They went from 28% to 24%. So you got a 4% tax cut if you were in the middle class. If you were in the upper class, it was something like 39. It went from 39% to 37. So they are still paying 13% more than the middle class, the upper class, and they make it as if it only benefited the upper class in this country, the tax cuts. And that's just them being... And what they do is they use the numbers. They say, well, it saved the upper class this much money. Yeah, because the upper class makes more money. So a 2% tax cut on, $100 million is more than a 4% cut on $100,000. It's just the way it works. If you make more money, a smaller percentage will still suffice. You will still end up saving more money than somebody that is that makes a lower amount of money, even if it's a more percentage of a cut. So what the critics will find, if they choose to look, is many economists who argue that allowing everyone to pursue all the opportunities they can in the marketplace with the minimal level of taxation and regulation will create generalized prosperity. The value of cutting taxes is not just cutting them for higher income groups, but for everyone. Letting everyone keep more of their value they create through exchange means that everyone has more incentive to create such value in the first place, whether it's through the ownership of capital or finding new uses for one's labor. So really what the argument of economists is, keep the tax rates low for everybody in a general sense. And why is that? They will be able to have more money. They will be able to keep more money. And with that money, they will use it to create more capital. They will use it for other things. For example, when you make money, you go and a lot of people invest their money in cryptocurrencies or securities, stock market, ETFs, what have you, stocks, bonds. That is to create more wealth for themselves personally. Sometimes it also does impact others depending on what type of investment choice you're choosing. Other people take the money and invest it directly to a smaller business, and you having that investment to that smaller business will help that smaller business grow. You will get a small percentage, and them growing will actually create more jobs, more people, more value in that company, in that business, and that's really what economists, that is what they strive for. For them, that's considered like a win-win situation. So that's really what he's characterizing there. So there's this small grain of truth to the trickle-down idea that he goes on to state. It's including, one of the key reasons that modern Westerners, including poor ones, live so much better today than at any point in the past is because our ability to combine our labor with more and better capital that has driven up our wages and driven down the cost of goods and services. The accumulation of capital by some does contribute to enrichment of others, as that capital makes workers as labor more productive and thus more valuable. So I've actually explained this before. I've said, yeah, there's no such thing. I don't believe in trickle-down economics, but when you have lower tax rates for people, they can invest more in their product. They can make it cheaper, much more efficient to make that product, and then in essence, and they can make it more efficient to make that product through let's say, some sort of a robot or some sort of automation. And then when you work your job, let's say before you would sell 10 cheeseburgers at McDonald's, now you're selling every shift 20 cheeseburgers, which means now they can afford to pay you more money because you're optimizing your work. And because you can make those 20 cheeseburgers faster, you can also sell those cheeseburgers to the customers cheaper. So everything in the free market is making things cheap. It works out to make commodities and consumer goods cheaper for everybody involved, and then it also helps to raise the wages of employees. So that historical truth is not a justification for directly subsidizing the current owners of capital, contrary to what thinkers like Thomas Piketty appear to believe. Merely possessing capital does not ensure a flow of income. It is not ownership of capital per se that benefits others, but the ability to deploy the capital in ways that create value for consumers. That is why reducing the tax and regulatory burden on everyone is so important. Anyone can come with new ways to create value and potentially enrich themselves and others in the process. So what he's saying is, the money that doesn't, people that sit, and this is usually how it does not work. This is considered, I guess you would call it old money. When you have money and you just leave it in the bank and you do nothing with it, that doesn't help anybody out. And usually people don't do that in a general sense. And that's not what he's characterizing. What he's characterizing is people that take their money and their capital and they deploy their capital in ways to create value for consumers, as well as for other companies, for people that work for the companies. And that's a new way, and keeping the tax rate lower helps, and this is such a key thing, so fundamental. Anyone can come with new ways to create value. So anybody, you have lower taxes. Now look at this, I have lower taxes. I have more capital myself. I'm able to save an extra $100 every single week and then deploy that over a year. $100 every single week for a full year comes out to $5,200, right? So this $5,200 now that I usually would be giving to the government, I have for myself. I can, look what I can do. I can invest in this company. I can, I can attempt to create this new product. I could, apply for this license so I can, sell guns or something of that, anything really, that creates value for customers. So he ends here, he states, the key is not transferring funds to the currently rich, but ensuring the most competitive economic environment possible so that those with the better ideas can put them into practice. The current owners of capital should not be able to lock in their position by using the political process to enrich themselves by legislation that specifically only benefits them. That's really the case. From what I understand, there's no capitalist or free marketalist, and capitalism I think is like a word kind of created by... in a way, I think it was created by the left to demonize free markets. So I like to usually just say free markets. There's nobody that is in favor of free markets that I know of. It's in favor of people at the very top getting all of these commodities, all of this special treatment, and then everybody else in the middle and the bottom get treated like crap. I don't know anyone that thinks that. So now I have Thomas Sowell debunking this myth of trickle-down economics. He speaks briefly on it. Play 8.
Where does this phrase trickle down come from?
Oh, I don't know. It was as far back as the Roosevelt administration. There is absolutely, it is an incredible thing. There is a non-existent theory that is constantly being attacked. Some years ago in my newspaper column, I challenged anybody to cite any economist outside of an insane asylum who had ever made that argument. Nobody ever came up with a single person. I would say, read my monograph on trickle-down theory. There is no such theory. Some years ago in one of my columns, I defied anybody to name any economist of any school of thought outside of an insane asylum who had ever advanced that theory. I pointed out that Joseph Schumpeter's 1,260-page book on the history of economic analysis, printed in very small letters, has no mention of any trickle-down. There is no such theory.
No economist has ever held that? No politician has ever said it?
I don't know of anybody who's ever said it. In fact, when I put this out, and I went out a nationally syndicated column, various people wrote me and said, well, so-and-so said that, so-and-so said it. But find me the person who said it. I don't want to hear how A said that B said it. Find me B and show me where he said it. And that was years ago. Not one example has been offered.
All right. So trickle-down economics is not a political theory. It is a political, I beg your pardon, it's not an economic theory. It is a political hack phrase.
He is correct when he says there's no politician, there's no economist that's ever said. The politicians that have said it have been the Democrats in trying to characterize what the Republicans and what the conservatives are all about, free markets. Now, Reaganomics, they called it Reaganomics. It was also known as laissez-faire economics, which pretty much means the government just getting out of the way of business owners and workers. Really, at the end of the day, that's what his theme was. There was never trickle-down economics that was extolled by that administration. So, how unions bully Democrats into giving them more power. This is a Washington Examiner piece. It's written by Hannah Cox. She works for the Foundation of Economic Freedom. I guess she works as she works in the gig economy over there. She's contracted. So she talks about, she kind of goes in very briefly about how some of these unions now are trying to push their influence to get Mark Kelly, Kristen Sinema, and Mark Warner, which are all Democrat holdouts right now, for this new PRO Act bill. Now, this PRO Act bill, what this would do, this would treat all employees as W-2 employees, meaning if you work in the what we like to call the gig economy, if you're contracted out, or how else can I better explain it? Let's say you work for Uber. You're technically not a full-time employee. You don't get a W-2 at the end of the year. You get a 1099. So that's also known as the gig economy. A lot of people, they'll have multiple jobs, or they'll hold multiple 1099s because they don't want all those benefits, because maybe they already have a main employer that they get benefits from. And then this enables them to kind of be more flexible with their schedule. You work when you feel like working. That's why Uber Eats and all of those kind of jobs, those contract positions, that's why they've been so successful, because you can work your full-time job, and then you can just hop right on really whenever you want. You make your own schedule, and then you can go ahead and do that, as well as what her job is here. She's a writer. I mean, I'm sure she probably writes certain pieces, and then she puts them out, and then she sends them out, and then they say, okay, we approve that, or what have you. That's what's good about being a contract employee. In your free time, you can, and that's why they call it a gig economy, you can work a little harder and make a little extra money. So since they can't force people to join and the unions don't like this, they like the idea of the PRO Act, because that makes everybody now a W-2 employee. Automatically, anybody that's on your payroll has to now be a full-time employee. You have to provide them benefits. So this helps the unions, because this makes the union's job much easier. It also installs full-on unionism, really unionization of an economy, because everyone's a full-time worker now. They're going to look for these union rights. This also raises the wage for union workers because of this, because the competition, it's going to be much easier for them to beat the competition. Thus, they have to raise everybody's income. Then by doing that, the union actually makes more money because of union dues. You know, I've been part of about 3 different unions now. I've had one that was decent. The other 2 were terrible. So, in case you haven't, and this says straight from the piece here, she writes, in case you haven't heard, unions are on the outs. Since they can't force people to join their ranks in 27 states, and since the Supreme Court ruled they can no longer compel non-members to pay dues, participation has fallen to an all-time low. Never one to take no for an answer, though. The unions have turned to their old buddies in the Democratic National Committee for some assistance, I guess. And boy, do the Democrats jump when the unions say jump. In a recent private call, union leaders told the Senate Democrats' campaign arm not to expect assistance in future elections unless they rally behind the passing of the Freelance Job Killing PRO Act. So that's the word I was trying to find, freelance. Reportedly, the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades was among the groups on the call. The Politico sources say the union made it clear that current Democrat holdouts such as Senators Mark Kelly, Kristen Sinema, and Mark Warner, that they will not give money to lawmakers who are not in favor of the bill. So what we have these union organizations using their money to buy influence in Washington, using their money to really dumb down the competition. In their case, that's what they want to do. This is not what a free market is. That's why I'm not a huge fan of labor unions. I never have been. In the private sector, I'm much more of a fan of them. If you're going to go with, if you're telling me which one to choose, if you say you can have one or the other, you can have the private sector, the public sector. I think public sectors are strictly unconstitutional because the person that is bargaining against the union, the person bargaining with the union on what the pay is going to be, is the person that the union is electing. So the union has so much influence that they elect some of these officials, and then these officials that they elect themselves are the ones that say how much money is going to be spent. And guess what? The money isn't coming out of the pocket of the government official. It's coming out of the pocket of you, the taxpayer. So the government official does not care how much money is going to the union, how much is going to the union employees. That's why I think public sector unions are completely unconstitutional, because you take the collective bargaining agreement between what is supposed to be, the taxpayer. You pretty much cut out the taxpayer and you just have like some middleman represent the taxpayer, where if the taxpayer has to pay more money, it doesn't even, the government official could care less. It has nothing to do with them. It's the worst way. It's the worst way to pay for anything possible. And Milton Friedman goes through it. There's 3 ways to pay. There's this and that. But I'm not going to get into it. But so yeah, I'd much rather go, if I had to choose, I'd go with private sector. In a general sense, I don't really. There's certain laws where you can't collude. As an employer, you can't collude with each other against workers, but here's the thing, workers can collude against the employer to create a union and unionize. And that's really what they want in this case. They want that because then that will stiffen up the competition for them. It'll make it much easier to be a union head, and then there may actually be more unionization because of it. So that will end the main podcast. I got a couple of quick headlines. Tennessee governor, he signs a bathroom bill. This is an Epic Times piece. He signs a bill to be indiscriminate in bathrooms. If you're a man, if you're a male, you go into the male bathroom. If you're a female, you go into the female bathroom. I know there's going to be some uproar from this. Very conservative state over in Tennessee. It's looking better and better. I've been wanting to move to Tennessee for about a year now, but I just haven't really gotten the funds together. I haven't got my life together. I don't have any job there. If I had a job there, I would move tomorrow. So Supreme Court unanimously rules warrantless home gun confiscation is unconstitutional. So this is this huge story that just recently came out. And I remember going over it with you all. It was Caniglia versus Storm. It was pretty much this guy and his wife, and he was making jokes about, taking his gun out, he was making jokes about him giving his wife a gun and letting her kill him to put him out of his misery. It sounded like an old, pissed off couple. This is written by the American Military News. It's written by Liz George. And the most important part of this investigation is it was actually a 9-0 vote in favor of the Fourth Amendment, upholding the Fourth Amendment. And Clarence Thomas, he was the confirming voice, he was the unanimous opinion for the Supreme Court, stating that law enforcement can execute many civic tasks in modern society, but there is not an open-ended license to perform them anywhere. So he's going to go on that he states the very core of the Fourth Amendment, right of a man to retreat into his own home and there be free from unreasonable search and seizure. Now, the only reasonable, I guess, without a warrant would be exigent circumstances, and in this case, they did not reach that because they were trying to apply some weird law, some like antiquated law that was unrelated. It was called if I can find it here specifically, the touchstone for the Fourth Amendment, the warrant clause, Fourth Amendment. He had it somewhere here that I must have... And then at the very end, it was very, very bad. I guess I didn't write... I had it with Biden and the Biden administration. Here it is. The Biden administration urged the Supreme Court to uphold the lower court's ruling. The lower court was that, the police had the right to just walk in this man's house without a warrant and take his guns from him. Now, they argue that the actions taken by law enforcement to confiscate the petitioner's firearms without a warrant were considered reasonable. So somehow that's okay through the Fourth Amendment. It's not unreasonable, it's reasonable in their opinion. Now, the touchstone of the Fourth Amendment is reasonableness, the DOJ's brief stated. So this is Biden's Department of Justice telling you that you have no right from the government just coming in your home and taking your weapons from you because in their opinion it's reasonable by their standard without a warrant. So for criminal, and this is the DOJ's brief statement, and I quote, "For criminal investigations, this court has generally incorporated the warrant clause into the Fourth Amendment's overarching reasonableness requirement, but it has not generally done so for searches or seizures objectively premised on justifications other than the investigation of wrongdoing. The ultimate question in this case is therefore not whether the respondent officers' actions fit within some narrow warrant exception, but instead whether those actions were reasonable, and under all the circumstances here, they were." So you have the Department of Justice. So this just goes to show the police state. We have a police state now. The Department of Justice believes in just confiscating people's weapons at a whim over a joke, okay? And our Supreme Court, who we have, we have really 4 liberal justices, counting John Roberts, they even were able to uphold this because they know that's a disaster. If the government can now just walk right into, just waltz right into your home and take whatever they want from you because now they see it, they see the search as somehow reasonable. And the only circumstance that I know of the Fourth Amendment would be, the only exception I know of is exigent circumstances, such as if an officer is outside somebody's house and he looks in and he sees this man with a gun pointed at somebody's head ready to fire. That is the only time that an officer at that time can now enter the building or make action or make some sort of move. So I have a Spanish politician suspended from Twitter for saying men cannot give birth. Fox News, of course, Twitter, once again, another social media hack site run by far leftists that do not believe in objective reality anymore, stating that men can somehow give birth. In their opinion, it was offensive to say that men cannot give birth, so they shut this guy down. I think he was suspended for a day or so, and then they reinstated him after the uproar. So Arizona governor cuts healthcare costs. So I wanted to go over this last show. I thought it was very interesting. Hannah Cox, once again, Foundation for Economic Freedom, she writes this piece. She goes on to talk about how telemedicine, telehealth, where you can go through your insurance company, you actually usually you pay a lower copay if you even have to pay one. And pretty much through video, you can talk to your healthcare provider and they will give you, they'll give you whatever advice you need. They'll give you a prescription instead of having to drive out every single time. And especially this works better in a state like Arizona where there's a vast region of land, not really a high population. To begin with, Arizona's so hot that sometimes during the year, if it's a hotter season, they can't even leave their house without overheating. So I see this as a solid proposal. So he made a permanent law making it very easy and accessible for telehealth situations where you can just get on the spot without having to wait, without having to drive out there and sit in a waiting room to get good care or good whatever advice you need. If you need some sort of referral or you need a prescription, it's very solid from what I understand. To me, it seems like a win-win for everybody because now Healthcare provider doesn't have to spend as much time on each individual patient. They could see more patients. This kind of cuts out the middleman, if you will. And it also makes it cheaper for everybody. So then she also left this chart, which I thought was very interesting, that I wanted to go over too. As you can see her up on the screen, the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics. Now they have the price changes from 1996 to 2016, and I'm assuming that they have also they've included inflation in this. Okay, so this is all inflation included. Consumer goods and services. If you notice what is so expensive, it is everything that is regulated by the government, okay? So we've seen TVs have dropped 96% off the table. TVs, I have mentioned them many times. It is probably the most free market system we have right now in this country. A lot of electronics, televisions, that every single year it's a TV that you bought. I have a TV in the room right next to me. It's 65-inch TV. It is Ultra HD. Bought it about I think 4 or 5 years ago. It was $2,000. That exact same TV is worth. You can go buy it now for $500. The exact same television. So there's a lot of innovation in that sector of the economy. So you look at TVs; they've dropped 96% since 1996 on average. Now toys, software, these are all huge drops. Wireless service, these are all things that aren't heavily regulated by the government. Then you look at new cars are a little bit more, and this is because there are a lot of laws. There's lemon laws, so there's almost like a warranty built into your actual pricing at the very end when you go to buy your car, that it's not going to break down in so many months or so many years. They have that warranty built in, so that's the reason it really has not gone down. It generally stays in a decent level, but that is huge to have a car payment every single month. Household furnishes is down 2.4%, clothing down 4.8%. So here's all the things that have skyrocketed, and some of them actually exponentially since 1996. You have textbooks, 207% increase. And this is really just college professors writing a book and then playing their kids, being like, oh, well, you have to buy this book because this is the only book I want, and it's a book that I wrote. So that's an extra way for them to make money. College tuition, 197%. Why is that, folks? That is because the government has gotten into the loan business, and they're giving out these insane loans to go to college for underwater basket weaving majors. And for these underwater basket weaving majors, when they get out of college, they do not have the money to even pay for this loan, but the government guarantees the loan. If they went to a private bank, the bank would not approve a loan for somebody that when they get out, their average income is $30,000. They wouldn't approve a loan for, $120,000 for 4 years of college. Now, the reason that college tuition has gone up because they know the government is guaranteeing that they are paying the check. So automatically now the colleges know that they can raise the price, and no matter what, kids are still going to come because they could still get their money from the government. They're going to get a guaranteed payment here. If it was a system where no one could really get a loan, or the loans were much lower with higher rates, you would have less people going to college is one thing. And for them to make up for that, they would need more people to come to college, so they'd have to automatically lower their rates and be more efficient that way. So childcare as well, 122%. Medical care, heavily regulated by the government. That's 105% since 1996. Food and beverages, same thing, heavily regulated by the government. But for the most part, food and beverage really isn't that expensive. It's up 64%, but in general sense, it's not extremely expensive. When you think of very expensive things in your life, yeah, on the reg, you have to go every single week to the grocery store. But you think of extremely expensive things when you get out of school, and you compare yourself, because now you can kind of compare yourself. Okay, my parents in that year, around that year, how much was their college loan debt? And it was nowhere near what the college loan debt are of the kids coming out of school now. It was maybe $2,000, and now kids are coming out of college with $100,000 or $50,000 student loan debt. Housing as well has gone up 61%. So that's the very last one. Housing has gone up because the government makes it very difficult to build in places. And by having more regulations, less builders want to come to get permits. They make it more expensive. Because of that, less builders want to come. So it's easier for the government makes these permits. They do all of these things to pretty much raise the price and inflate the price all around the area, because there is a very heavy demand with zero supply, or a very low supply of housing or real estate that's available. And that the reason that no new real estate can be built is because you have the government getting involved in ordinances as well as these permits. They're making it very expensive to build because of regulation. So what else do I have here? I have Apple's new privacy feature. Also, that was written by Hannah Cox. I was looking into that one. That one I thought was very, very interesting. The one thing you could knock Apple for certain things like Pollard, but the one thing that Apple's been pretty consistent on is their privacy features have always been very solid. They've always had a pretty solid firewall also built into their iOS, and their UI is very good. But they have this new privacy feature where you can make sure apps are not spying on you. So when you go on Facebook, they're looking at all the activity that you currently are doing on your phone, not just on that app alone. So let's say you had a tab open on Safari of watches because you want to buy a new watch. If you go on Facebook, Facebook will now start advertising watches because they're watching what you from Facebook. As long as that app's open, they're watching everything you're doing on Safari, as long as Safari is also open. So now Apple has added this new privacy feature. When you go to download an app, you can decide to opt out of that where they can't spy on everything else that you're doing, which I think is pretty solid. So the Washington Post, very last one I have here. The Washington Post is a National Pulse piece. The Washington Post, the left-wing bastion over here, they're calling for an investigation of the Wuhan lab, which is very interesting. And just to quote them, the NIAID and its parent organization, the National Institutes of Health, so this is all people that Fauci runs this, fund much of the collaborative work between U.S. scientists and the Wuhan lab, including extensive work on bat coronaviruses. The letter asks Fauci, who had repeatedly thrown cold water on the lab accident theory, to hand over all available information to U.S. government funding and support for the Wuhan lab, especially relating to gain-of-function research. Republicans on the Energy and Commerce Committee wrote in March to the NIH director, Francis Collins, as well as in April to the EcoHealth Alliance's Peter Daszak, the closest collaborator and fiercest defender of the Wuhan lab, demanding extensive records about their research and collaborations. Collins, Fauci, and Daszak have not responded to congressional inquiries nor to requests for comment. So the Washington Post is actually calling for a deep investigation of this because they actually want to get to the bottom of this as well, which I think is very interesting because, once again, that's a bastion of left-wing politics. So that will conclude this one. I know I ran a little bit long today. I thought it was very important actually to get into some of this economic stuff because I think there's a lot of economic illiteracy out there, and I think it's important that we kind of, as conservatives, if we're going to call for lower taxes, we know why we're calling for lower taxes. So I greatly appreciate everyone tuning in. Please like, share, subscribe. Let people know about the podcast. Drop the mic on everybody. Or actually on Rumble, they call it Give Me a Rumble. You pretty much hit that glove like a boxing glove. Hit down on that bad boy, and that's considered a like over in Rumble. So I greatly appreciate it, and I will see you all next time. Thank you.